Hello and welcome back. It's Andrew Ace, you spelled U-Y-S, pronounced Ace, and I'm doing another graphic novel review, this episode covering Star Wars. So, with Disney's purchase of Lucasfilm's Star Wars franchise, a lot of canon material has been done away with. And I understand this upset a lot of fans, myself included. It's not that we don't understand why, to make accessible to new viewers, readers, also so that they're not kind of constrained by what has been, I'm going to say since the 90s, so basically 30 years almost of outside the movies, outside, what most people might know as Star Wars, and instead produced through Dark Horse Comics and their comic book line. Growing up, other than the novels, which was the other main source that has, of course, now been done away with, you had the comic books done by Dark Horse Comics. And what was really cool between the comics and the novels was they were all one shared universe, and that is to say that you knew that Lucasfilm was busy making sure that the timelines all lined up. Now the first book I want to show you doesn't actually have one of these timelines, probably because it is so old. The Star Wars Dark Empire was first published, I need to take a moment here, this is a second edition from 1995. So, mid-90s, and you have a groundbreaking Star Wars comic, really in part because Dark Horse Comics, while they'd been getting a lot of movie franchises, look for Terminator, for Aliens, two of my favorite, look for Predator. Better yet, in the 90s, before there was AVP, this is where you could find Alien vs. Predator, and that was just the SH with an exclamation mark T. And they put out Dark Empire. I'm not sure this was their first Star Wars comic book / graphic novels. This is a collection of comics. But it certainly was very dark and for more mature readers. And that is to say then that people that had been teens and big fans of the Star Wars comics, say in the 80s, or Star Wars movies in the 80s, would find this to be sort of, what they were looking for. I don't want to give away the plot too much, other than it centers on Luke and Leia, the return of the Emperor, and some absolutely cool, badass spaceships. There's an Empire, Dark Empire 2, and really in my own imagination, I must admit that I kind of I run them together. So to separate some of the events might be a little hard, but certainly it really was kind of a shot across the bow for Star Wars fans, as this was a much darker, more mature take on the characters. And that certainly appealed to me and to other readers, even though I was maybe a little bit young. But this was a big, big hit. And Dark Horse Comics had the Star Wars franchise right up until, of course, Disney's purchase of Lucasfilm, where now it has been moved back to Marvel, who during the original movies had the license to put out the Star Wars comics, and if you look for the Star Wars comics from the late 70s and early 80s, that's who you'll find published them. And of course, excuse me, since Disney now owns Marvel and owns Star Wars, it makes sense they've come together. Then, unfortunately, the only real big deal for me is that this story is no longer, when I say canon, no longer so pushed, maybe. If you were a Star Wars fan 10 years ago, 5 years ago even, and you'd come into a comic book store and ask me, oh, can you recommend a great read? I would have definitely put this in your hands. I couldn't have sung his praises enough, and I would have said, oh, this goes well with all the other comics, all the other novels. So to prove my point, I'm going to go to my next favorite read, another book, unfortunately, another series done away with by Disney's purchase of Lucas and of the Star Wars franchise. Though, to be honest, the series was pretty much wrapping up before this deal happened. Would they have continued it? Who knows? Maybe they still will. Legacy, and what made this so much of a fun read for me, is it's set 100 and odd years into the future. So with the Star Wars franchise, you get a lot of Knights of the Old Republic, and moving backwards through time. And that's great. I mean, they have like 3,000 plus years of history, Sith versus Jedi, and certainly that, is rich with stories. But what I liked was that because this is in the future, in a way you have no way of knowing what's going to happen next. No character sort of has to live based upon canon, based upon a previously published source. In this, anybody can die. Anything can happen to anybody, and I found that particularly refreshing. The plot is that Luke Skywalker's grandson, so you can see how this isn't already having problems with the new movies, but Luke Skywalker's grandson has become a bounty hunter. He's actually, he uses drugs, he uses a gun, he hates everything the Force, whether it's Sith or Jedi or anything, and he travels around with a band of criminals. You'd think, oh, maybe sort of like Han Solo, with maybe a darker edge. Yeah, if Han Solo was a racist ASSHOLE, then certainly this guy is that. But what the story does then is it gives you a protagonist that you don't want to like, and sort of, the story thrusts him into a confrontation in the galaxy level between the new sort of Sith Order. And what's cool is that in the new Sith Order, it's no longer one master, one apprentice. You have dozens of Sith, and that's in part what I really liked about this. But you also got the Imperial Knights, who are like Jedi, but serve the Emperor, but the Emperor is not the Sith Emperor. Anyway, the politics are interesting. And as I was saying, I mentioned the reason why I loved reading all the different Star Wars novels and graphic novels was the timeline that Lucasfilm provided. And that timeline basically guaranteed, okay, so my apologies, Old Republic era, 25,000 to 1,000 years before Star Wars A New Hope. So, as you can see, they got a lot of time, and then this, goes to the New Republic era, the New Jedi Order era, the Legacy era, which is this, and even, covers the Infinites, which were sort of alternate timelines of the original movies. What it meant, though, was that you knew if you bought any Star Wars comic book that they fit into a larger whole, and that was great for, readers who loved continuity, who wanted stuff that was canon. And of course, a little tough now to discover that 30 years of reading and collecting just sort of swept away. But again, I understand, as much as this is a phenomenal read, and I can't recommend Legacy enough, I can definitely understand for Disney, it would pretty much paint them into a corner, and to take this piece out, though it is the future, that, maybe, what's still in, what's not. And of course, it's not that everything is being done away with either. I think part of what I found a little bit difficult was trying to figure out, and eventually I believe Disney's got a list online, or Lucas does, Lucasfilm, or the Star Wars, but I saw a list saying, okay, these are the books that are still considered part of continuity, but it was a pretty small list. And I gotta be honest, I'm not even sure this made the cut. That said, prior to Disney's purchase of Lucasfilm, of Star Wars, this was really, for me, this series was the best part of the prequel movies. So back when A Phantom Menace comes out, obviously Dark Horse ramps up, starts putting out a number of new comics, movie adaptations, yay, but then also what's going on in the Star Wars galaxy at that time period. And when the next movie comes out, Attack of the Clones, you get the Clone Wars being visited. And of course now you've got the Clone Wars cartoon, which I'm only up to season 2. But even before that, there was a kind of a really blocky, almost Samurai Jack style animated Star Wars, Clone Wars cartoon. Phenomenal if you can find it. Definitely worth checking out. Likewise, they put out this, and this series, there's 9 graphic novel volumes, a number of issues, and what it did was, it took a look at some of the other Star Wars characters, the Jedi, the Sith, or the villains in some case, they're not quite Sith yet, maybe, and the fights that they were getting up to. Definitely meant for readers 13 plus. This was not for, in a way, the kids that Phantom Menace Attack of the Clones. These movies were trying to bring in. This was more for, oh, you were a fan of the original movies, or, you know, you grew up in the 90s. Hey, check this out. Much darker, again.